How do you connect seemingly unrelated dots to create some of the most memorable experiences? The CEO and founder of BrainFarm, Dean Carlson, talks about some of the most compelling experiences that he created. He tells us how he convinced the best-selling author, Malcolm Gladwell, to host his first masterclass in South Africa at the BCX Disrupt Summit. He also shares how he co-created the Discovery Invest Leadership Summit, which saw Sir Richard Branson come to South Africa as a speaker at that event.
So kind of to come to market with a new project with a lineup that includes the likes of Richard Branson and Malcolm Gladwell, to me was a dream come true, because I think for many years I spent so much time consuming everything that these guys put on the market, reading all of their books, listening to every piece of content that they had available online.
We also talk about a Guinness World Record that they set with an art installation made of coffee in celebration of DJ Black Coffee.
The impact of that campaign, it exceeded all expectations. I mean, if you look at the amount of traffic that it got onto our event website, the amount of publicity that it generated.
Keep listening to find ways to connect the dots in your work and create some of the most unforgettable experiences. This is The Lead Creative. Welcome to the Lead Creative Podcast, where we talk to creative industry leaders, influencers, and brands. We discuss the strategies that influence brand thinking and shape industries. Thought leaders and heads of agencies let us in on some of their thinking and insights. I'm your host, Mongezi Mtati. Enjoy the show, and please share and subscribe. Dean, thank you so much for making the time to chat with us on The Lead Creative. It's been a while since we last chatted. How are you doing?
Mongezi, thank you so much, my man. It's good to see you again. And yeah, it has been a while, but such a pleasure to be on this platform, man. I mean, I think I remember when we first started talking about the platform, and to see what you've done with it, how you've breathed life into it, is just, I'm inspired. So congratulations. And it's a real honor to be here. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. Dean, just to dive right in, you organized your first experience or event as a kid, which was a bicycle race for you and some of your
Yes.
friends down the street where you
Yes.
stayed. Do you think that in some way, thinking back to that experience, do you think that that influenced the kinds of experiences that you went on to create later on in
I
life?
think so. I mean, there's no doubt that I think that by me doing that, it gave me the confidence to later in life, when I had the opportunity to organize an extreme sport event, a sandboarding event, it gave me the confidence to do that, because it kind of the stakes weren't super high, but I mean, at the same time, I had no eventing experience, no formal training in the eventing space, and I think that the small things that we do when you take on a small project, it builds your confidence, it builds your circle of influence, and what you believe is possible and not. And so there's no doubt that I think the small beginnings build up to get you to a point where you actually believe that you may be able to pull off something bigger. And so without those experiences, it's unlikely I would have even considered getting involved in the space that I'm operating in today.
You mentioned a sandboarding event that you organized. Yes. You also organized and sold quite a lot of concepts, yes, and events and experiences over the, yes, years. Which one was the most inspiring for you to bring to life?
I would say probably the Discovery Leadership Summit, I would say probably was the most inspiring. I mean, there was, I think in many ways, because it was my first big business conference, and also combined with the fact that I got to work with two of my heroes on that launch event. I mean, many of my heroes, but two people who I held in very high regard for a very long time. So kind of to come to market with a new project with a lineup that includes the likes of Richard Branson and Malcolm Gladwell, to me was a dream come true, because I think for many years I spent so much time consuming everything that these guys put on the market, reading all of their books, listening to every piece of content that they had available online. And to a point where I kind of like started feeling like I knew them, and so badly wanted to meet them and interact with them. And that when that event finally came together and that became real, it actually happened. It was just like it was unreal. It was a mind-blowing experience, and to like I think I'll never forget like walking through the venue and hearing Sir Richard thank me from the stage by name. I mean, like that was, to me, was just like the most exciting and greatest acknowledgement I could ever have gotten, because because you hold the guy in such high regard, because you know that he's such a big deal. It was mind-blowing.
Absolutely. How did that conference come about, the Discovery Invest Leadership Summit? Because at the time that event was hosted, there weren't that many conferences of that size, and I would probably go as far as to say it was the first of its kind in that caliber of events that was partnered up with a brand such as Discovery. How did that come
Yeah,
about?
so I'm pretty confident that it was the first event of its kind at that size and caliber to ever take place in South Africa. And the way it came about was I was with Prime Media for a couple of years, where I hosted simulcast events. I was a project manager hosting simulcast events, and the first event I was involved with at Prime Media was a Richard Branson event, but it wasn't live. It was beamed in via satellite, and we beamed in into cinemas around the country, and that kind of like sparked something inside of me, where I kind of like the excitement of getting to do something with Sir Richard, and seeing the way people responded to that kind of like just really got me quite excited about the idea. Then at the time, there were quite a few Virgin companies launching in South Africa, and so got to meet and interact with some of the people who work closely with Sir Richard. And at the time, I was very involved in the personal development space. So I developed a personal development training program that I presented to the guys from Liberty Life, etc. And I very badly wanted to spend time with Sir Richard to pick his brain and understand how he did what he did, and to kind of see if I could extract some of the learnings from the things that he experienced and built in his life into this program. And so I set up a meeting with one of the executives in Sir Richard's top six leadership team, and asked if I could arrange a one-on-one with him. And the idea was pretty much dismissed off the bat. So I kind of like I was told that many other people had similar requests, and it would be impossible for Sir Richard to accommodate all of those requests, which, I mean, like in retrospect, probably makes sense. But I think the way my brain is wired is to kind of like always look for, if that's not possible, then what is? I mean, like how is there another way for me to still achieve this? And at the time, I kind of like I became aware of a lot of these type of events, leadership summit type events, taking place in places like New York, etc. And at the time, I mean, like it was, for me, it was like getting to attend an event like that was just not within my means. I mean, like it was just because you had to take the ticket price combined with the flights and accommodation and time away from the office, etc. And so I started thinking about, what if I could do a similar thing to what I did with the extreme sports space, but putting together a live event like this. I was at Prime Media Unlimited. I think I was employee number 6 or employee number 7 to join there, and then the company grew very quickly, but when I joined, they didn't have an HR department or HR procedures in place. So, and that changed because all of a sudden they had so many employees that they needed to get an HR department. So I arrived at the office one day, and they had like a stack of documents in front of on my desk, restraints of trade, and all of these documents that I needed to sign. And going through these documents, I realized that if I signed those documents, I would probably never be able to execute on this dream of being able to put this business conference together. So I've been dreaming up this idea, and that was effectively the kick up the butt that I needed to just get off my chair and start pursuing that dream, because I realized that if I'd signed those documents, it would no longer be an option. And so I put in my resignation at Prime Media, and I started building what then became the Discovery Leadership Summit. It was, I mean, like in many ways, it was kind of like, I think that if it wasn't for the fact that I was so passionate about making that vision a reality, it would not have been possible, because I mean, like even Malcolm Gladwell, when I approached him first time, he declined. When I approached him the second time, he declined. I think it was only on the third or fourth attempt that I went back that he eventually agreed to participate. And it was because I realized that this was kind of like I just left a very good and very secure position at what was at the time one of South Africa's leading media companies to go and pursue this dream. So, I mean, like you kind of like, you leave the security behind to go and pursue the unknown, and it's a daunting thought. So kind of like that makes you fight even harder to make sure that you bring this vision to life in a way that will make you prouder. So I think, it's been, it was I guess like the necessary push that I got from Prime Media's HR department that nudged me to go and pursue that dream.
Yeah. And after that, you've brought Malcolm Gladwell to South Africa twice.
Yes.
You brought Sir Richard Branson to that event, particularly. Yes. You had Will.i.am at the same event as Malcolm Gladwell. You've brought people like Dan Ariely and many others to South Africa, and to stages that you've put together, that you've thought up. Who was the most inspiring person for you to bring to an event, and how did that change your strategy?
I think, I mean, like, it's a very good question. I think,
because there are so many people that, all the people that you've brought are inspiring to me, and I've followed your work. I've been to the summits and I've listened to them. I've read their work, but I guess somewhere along the way, there must have been one that really shifted your thinking, whom you thought was absolutely untouchable.
Yes, I mean, like I mean, like it's probably a lazy answer, but I mean, like I mean, there are many, but I think there's a couple that really stand out, and I think first and foremost would probably be Will.i.am. Because we kind of like we the reason we approached Will to participate in the Disrupt Summit was because of his involvement in technology. I mean, like he's involved with the World Economic Forum. He's very involved in technology through his company BrainFarm, and I was like, I mean, like you kind of like you expect, like, that you're working with an absolute, like with a global music superstar, and so you expect kind of like, I think my expectation was in a way shaped around that, and then you work with this guy and you realize that this is the reason that this guy was head of innovation for Intel, because he's so incredibly smart. He just like he sees things that the average person probably just completely misses, just because he's been exposed to so much, and because he's so super smart. I mean, like, so I think he definitely shifted my needle, and the needle for me in terms of getting me to consider opportunities that before I wouldn't have thought possible. The second would be Dan Ariely, who you mentioned. I mean, like, this guy is just like, he's one of the humblest, one of the most approachable speakers I've ever worked with. So in the moment, when you're with him, there's nothing else exists. It's not, you can see that he's like completely absorbed in that conversation, and whatever you're busy talking about is the only thing that exists in that moment. And I think that presence that he brings to the interaction is just like, is incredible. But then also the way that he sees and approaches the world. I mean, like, the things that came up during the conversations with him just made me realize why this guy is so incredibly celebrated in the space that he's in, because he definitely, there's no way that he approaches the world in a similar way to anybody else that I've ever come across. So he would be on that list. And then number 3, I would say Malcolm Gladwell. I mean, like, again, with Malcolm, I've had the unique privilege of spending a lot of time with him, like, even outside of the events that we've worked together on. And I don't think, like, I mean, like, during those conversations, I mean, like, if we spend like 5% of that time talking about his books and his work, it's a lot. I mean, like, so it's basically like, I'm incredibly passionate about music, so most of those conversations have been about music. This was before he came out with the Broken Record podcast and all of that. But he's incredibly intelligent and again, like, incredibly generous as well. Like, I mean, I think when I first decided to get involved in the eventing industry in the US market, I kind of found myself in a precarious situation where I decided to pursue this project in a completely new market, not like in New York City, and realized that I didn't really have a very strong support system in New York, but I knew a couple of people, and Malcolm was like, I mean, like, I remember I was in Los Angeles at the time, and I reached out to Malcolm, and like a few days later I was sitting across a table with Malcolm, and he just, the way he kind of like opened up his network to me and assisted me was just so generous, and has really shaped the direction that I kind of, or determined the direction that I decided to go in my career in quite a significant way. So I think it's between those 3. I mean, like, there are many others, but I mean, like, those 3 are just, they stand out.
Yeah. There's an experience that took place around the time that you organized the summit with Dan Ariely. And I think you narrowed it down to being able to organize him coffee or something at the time that led to him talking about you to Adrian Gore, if I'm not mistaken,
there was actually Nassim
as someone who gets things done.
There was Nassim
Taleb. Yes.
So we had,
and I think, because what I want to, sorry, Dean, I think what I want to, you can expand on that thought, but what I want to come to is the importance of paying attention to, I think, the smaller detail, the finer detail in creating a big experience.
Thank you, Mongezi. Yeah, so I think, so that experience, what happened was we had Nassim Taleb and Stephen Dabner from Freakonomics on the same lineup, and they both arrived in South Africa on the same flight. And I went through to go meet the 2 of them at OR Tambo, and then we got a phone call saying that there was a traffic jam in Sandton, and we needed to get the 2 of them back to Discovery's head office. What at the time was still at number 135 West Street in Sandton. We needed to get them there, and there was no way we were going to be able to make it back fighting traffic. So I, with their permission, got the 2 of them onto the Gautrain, and then we basically got someone to pick us up from the Gautrain stop in Sandton and just take us up the street to Discovery's head office. But then what happened was, as Nassim Taleb came off the plane, like he was like, you could see he was like a little bit distraught. So the lady who sat next to him knocked over a cup of coffee onto his BlackBerry at the time. At the time, everybody was still using BlackBerries. So his phone didn't work. And so basically looked at the model number without making a big thing about it, like just saw the model of BlackBerry that he was using. And then as we stopped at the Gautrain stop in Sandton, I handed him a brand new BlackBerry, the exact model that he had still in the box. And he looked at me and he said to me, "What is this?" And I said to him, "It's a new phone. Yours is damaged." And he just like, he looked at me and he was like, kind of like, he was very grateful, but he kind of like, and we carried on. And then Stephen Dabner asked me for a flash drive or something, or a memory stick or something for his camera. And then in a similar way, like while Nassim Taleb was there, I gave Stephen Dabner this memory card, and it was done like kind of like in a seamless way. And I mean, like it was really like the team that I worked with who enabled this. Who I was the guy who got to kind of like hand these things over, but at the same time, I was with the two of them the whole time. So it was the team behind me that kind of like made all of this happen. But then what happened was, Nassim Taleb was like, he went up to, after the press conference, he went up to Adrian Gore's office, and then the two of them were there with another individual, a senior individual at Discovery. And then Nassim Taleb asked Adrian Gore a question, and Adrian responded by saying that he didn't know what the answer was, but he would find out and get back to Nassim. And then Nassim responded by saying that, "Just ask Dean. He's like Zorro. He just goes like this, and it's sorted." Huh? And to me, that was one of the biggest acknowledgements that anybody could ever give me, because first of all, I mean, like Nassim is not an easy guy to please. Like he kind of like I mean, like if you go onto his blog, he says on there that he doesn't want any honorary doctorates. He doesn't want anybody to approach him with press interviews or anything like that. So he kind of like he's quite specific in terms of the way he chooses to go through the world. But I think that acknowledgement was something that really meant quite a lot to me. And I think that the detail that you'd refer to, I mean, like I think. Sometimes I feel like it's almost like a bit of a curse, because you kind of like, and it's like that whole classic Spider-Man thing is like that, it's both a blessing and a curse. But where I have a tendency to lose myself in the detail and to try and make every small detail at my events perfect and memorable. And I think some of that stems from the fact that I read this book many years ago, where they spoke about a study that they did at an airline, where they got people to rate the cups that they got, where they got people to rate the seats that they sat in, where they got people to rate every single item of their experience in flying with this airline, and then found that the small items added up to the average, and then they asked them to give an overall impression. So they would give, let's say, overall impression of 3. And then if you added up all of the smaller items, like all of the individual items, and averaged it out, it would average out to a 3. And so they realized that by improving on the small things, on the small details, like the quality of the cup, they could increase the overall rating that the airline got. So kind of like that stuck in my head, and I kind of like... Yes. Whenever I go into a new project, like I look at the small details, the small things that can help me bring up the overall average, and kind of like tend to lose myself in that. But yeah, that's really where that comes from.
You mentioned, Dean, you acknowledge your team and the people you work with in making these experiences possible, in making this small detail that you refer to come to life. How do you find the right collaborators to make these experiences happen? How do you go about building and creating that kind of team?
Yeah, so it's a difficult thing, Mongezi. I mean, like, I think the best way, I mean, like, I think, and in my mind, or let me say in my experience, the way that really works for me, and that's worked for me in the past, is just finding those individuals through your network, through people that you interact with, instead of putting out an advert in the newspaper and waiting for random people to come in and I mean, like, or working through placement agencies and all that. And sometimes those things are necessary. Sometimes you don't have the privilege of just being able to tap into your network, but I think that it's something that you kind of like, that's almost difficult to quantify, difficult to explain. But when you work with somebody on a project and there's a chemistry and you kind of like, you work really well with that individual, and you need to take on a similar project, it's like, your mind is going to go to that individual first, and then once you've pulled off, like, once you've had one success with that individual, the second time around, you're not even going to consider somebody else, because you worked so well with that specific person. So it's very much organic. It's been, in my experience, it's been very much an organic experience, where you get to work with somebody on a completely unrelated project, and then when you take on something new, like, invite them to come and join you. And sometimes it's not possible, sometimes it is, but like, that's really the thing that's worked best for me, and that also involves getting out there as much as possible, meeting and interacting with new people, attending events, getting involved in projects, and just getting out there as much as possible, because that helps you to build that network, and then it gives you the ability to tap into that network, to bring really
Right.
incredible people on board.
In the BCX Disrupt Summit, you were able to convince Malcolm Gladwell to deliver a
Yes.
masterclass. And as I understand it, that was the first of its
Yes.
kind for
Yeah.
him as
Yes.
well. Why did you go that route, firstly, and not the presentation style that you would have usually gone with for any other
Yeah.
event?
So I think, it, there are a couple of things. I mean, like, you kind of like, I think that I think the big reason for that is really the immersion is the immersion that I wanted to create, because I feel like with Malcolm and most incredible speakers that we get to see, we kind of like, you get to the end of 45 minutes or an hour, and you want more. You want to kind of like, you want to hear more about this, like, and time tends to disappear, especially with Malcolm, when he starts talking and engaging with an audience, like, time disappears, and 45 minutes or an hour, like, really feels like a few minutes. And so I felt that it was something that that people probably wanted, and I think that the reality is that that we were right. Like, Malcolm didn't want to do that. Like, he pushed back initially when we approached him to host the masterclass, because it's not something that he generally does. But when eventually we got to position it, or I got to position it to him in a way that was relatable, that he understood where I was coming from and why we were asking this, he agreed to do it, and the feedback that we got was just overwhelming. I mean, it was so positive, and from Malcolm's side as well. Like, he absolutely loved it. I mean, like, it was intense for him, but because it's like, it was quite a big commitment of his time, but he absolutely loved it, and it was just really that immersion that we wanted to create, because it's like, to a large degree, I mean, like, if you look at how the Navy SEALs, when they go into a foreign country and they need to learn that new language, they don't sign up for a language program and spend like 6 years learning how to speak that language. I mean, like, they kind of like, they figured out ways to compress that time, and part of the key in that compression and that enables them to learn that new language so quickly is immersion. So you kind of like, you have to immerse yourself in an environment and suck up whatever it is that you, or like all of the knowledge that you're able to suck up in that short time. So that was really the thinking behind it and the reasoning behind it, and the reason we decided to go with a masterclass.
Yeah, and it was an absolutely, I think, memorable event, because having been there myself, I not only learned a lot from Malcolm, I got to get a sense of it was almost as though you had read his books. Now you're sitting across the table from him and he takes you through his
Exactly.
thinking of how he wrote the books, right? So that was, and that summit particularly was a massive one. That's when you brought Will.i.am onto the same stage. And I remember that it was sponsored by Porsche. So we'd be walking around at lunch and there'd be these 911s around us there. What did you learn about creating experiences and about yourself, as well as connecting unusual dots leading up to and during the BCX Disrupt Summit? Because once again, that was a completely unique experience from anything else that at least I had been to, where there were speakers and it felt like a conference, but it was also at a racetrack, and it was also surrounded by everything that made the experience far bigger in one's mind than just a conference.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, like I learned a lot from that event. I think that a big part of what made that event so unique, I guess, was the fact that it was the Disrupt Summit. So we kind of like we challenged ourselves to find ways of disrupting the usual way of doing things. And again, I mean, I think I would give credit to the people that we got to work with. I mean, like I think that the individual from BCX's side at the time, Jess Mason, and her CEO, I think they got it. So they understood what we were trying to achieve, and it was kind of like on brand, and so their contribution to this was also massive. I mean, like in terms of their thinking that they brought. I mean, like for me, like I remember like growing up, like I'm quite a sentimental guy, so I still have like two of the toy cars that I have like from when I was a kid, and both of those are Porsches. I mean, like, so I kind of like, I've always been like, I had a very strong affinity with Porsche and the Porsche brand. So and because I kind of like, I knew the people at Porsche, I felt that their brand was in line with what we were trying to achieve. And so approached them and arranged for them to take care of the ground transportation for all of the speakers that we worked with. And the guys like Malcolm, for example, who's like a massive motorhead and loves anything with four wheels, was just like, he absolutely loved it, because we got somebody to pick him up in a really impressive 911, and then also wanted to create that immersion by bringing the vehicles into the space. And I think like we also like if you look at the event producer that we worked with, there's a lady by the name of Ingi Crow, who I mean, like I would be loath to get involved in any big event like that without having Ingi by my side. And I think like a lot of this came from her experience and network as well, because she kind of like assisted us or guided us in coming up with some incredible ideas in terms of making taking the disrupt theme into the smaller details, into the fiber of the event, in terms of basically using little displays where ordinarily you'll have like a little flower pot vase with flowers in it, like, which works for like a traditional type of event. But for this, we kind of flipped it around, and then we would have things like Legos in there, or like things that kind of like I would say ideas that made people feel like almost like reconnect with a childlike with the childlike side of ourselves. Because I mean, like, it's like Picasso who said that we're all born creative, and the trick is just to keep that creativity alive, because life, I mean, like, I'm paraphrasing terribly here, but life tends to squeeze it out of us. So I think it would be a combination of the people again. I mean, like, first and foremost would be the people, and then also like just tied into the people is the networks that we build up going through life, and the people that we get to meet and interact with, and that enabled us to bring on the likes of Porsche and all of the. We also spend a lot of time on the value add side, where we would approach value add partners, and one of my team members at the time, Blair Skippers, was somebody who was incredibly good at this as well, in terms of identifying those value add partners and approaching them and bringing value add partners on board that would effectively help us build these events into more memorable experiences. And also managing those relationships, because I mean, like, it's just like there's so many partners on board. When you've got so many partners on board and running an event like this, it's impossible for a single individual to manage all of those relationships and to keep all of those moving parts together. So it would, I would definitely give credit to the people who we get to work with, not just the team, but also the sponsors and the larger production team who put all of it together.
One of the other things you did following the BCX Disrupt Leadership Summit was that Guinness World Record setting experience that you created at Santon City, where there was a mural of DJ Black Coffee that took over a big part of Santon City. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and about how that contributed to the event that it was part of, or that it was meant to then market and amplify?
Yes. So I think so there was a bit of a passion project that I wanted to kind of like bring to life. We didn't have any sponsors involved in that project. It was effectively like I read Ryan Holiday's book. We actually wrote 2 books on the topic, or two related books. I mean, like, the one was Trust Me, I'm Lying, and the second one was Growth Hacker Marketing. So I read these books, and I think that with Growth Hacker Marketing, I was very impressed with the how unique the approach was, in terms of how Ryan was able to get ideas to spread on effectively like a shoestring budget, like and any event promoter, I mean, like, kind of like finds themselves, like, even if you kind of like, if you're working on a project that's very well funded and very well supported by sponsors, you find yourself in a position where you have to be innovative, you have to be creative in terms of how you get ideas to spread. And this, I felt that Ryan had kind of like figured out a completely different way of doing this. And I mean, like, I subsequently found like quite a few other people who've done incredible work in that space as well. But I approached Ryan, and I told him that I wanted to host an event on Growth Hacker Marketing, and that I wanted to do it in a unique way. I wanted to do it promote the event only using growth hacker marketing techniques and strategies, as opposed to traditional media. And because the stakes were quite high, I mean, like financially, the risk that you take in putting an event like this together makes it quite a high risk. And so I said to him, so I was comfortable taking that risk and absorbing that risk from our side, but I would feel more comfortable doing that with him in my corner. So he invited me over to Austin, Texas, where the two of us sat together and started working on a strategy of how we would take the event to market using growth hacker marketing techniques and strategies. And then to bring a local flavor to the event, we needed to find somebody like a South African a speaker who would be able to add value and contextualize and make the event relevant to a South African audience. And so I kind of like realized that nobody kind of like really does that better than DJ Black Coffee, because I mean, like, this guy's like literally came from nowhere and became like a global superstar. And a lot of the things that he did were kind of things that they were unexpected and kind of like tied in to some way with Ryan's philosophy and teachings around growth hacker marketing. And so we approached DJ Black Coffee, and he agreed to come on board and participate in this event. And then what happened was, like, probably 2 or 3 years prior to this, I stumbled across this artist by the name of Percy Maimela, who was at the time was a merchandiser at a grocery store, and somebody knocked over a bag of salt in one of the storerooms, and Percy walked through there and saw the salt, and then instead of calling someone to clean up, he started playing around in the salt, and by the time he was done, it transformed this bag of salt into like this unbelievably beautiful artwork. And somebody snapped a photo of that, and this went like on social media, started spreading, because it's just like, it was such a beautiful picture. And that resulted in Percy like pursuing his art career. But I kind of like, I saw this and didn't really like, I sent it on to a friend who I thought would be able to do something with this idea, but never really thought about it again. And then when we were busy working on this campaign with DJ Black Coffee, I woke up one day and I thought, like, but what if we could get this guy to use coffee instead of salt? And so we tracked him down.
How difficult was it to get a hold of him?
It was actually, it was my colleague Blair who tracked him down. She was like, within a couple of hours, she had tracked him down, and we went through to see him. And we sat down with him, and he invited us into his studio. And I said to him, listen, like, what you're doing is amazing. We want you to come and do this as part of a promotional campaign around one of our events, but need you to use coffee instead of salt. And then Percy started pushing back, saying, like, listen, I can't, like, because it's positive and negative. I don't know, like, all this like stuff that I didn't understand. And I said to him, listen, I get all of this, but the reason I want to ask you to reconsider is because we're doing this event with DJ Black Coffee, and you can't do an art installation of DJ Black Coffee using salt. Like, it has to be coffee. And then Percy's eyes lit up, and he said to me, listen, I've been wanting to do something with DJ Black Coffee for such a long time. I don't know why I never did it, but now that you're standing here, I realize it's because God wanted me to wait for you. And so he said, I'll figure it out. So we got Percy some coffee, and he started practicing. And a couple of days later, he sent us this photo of one of his practice shots, and he nailed it. And then we took the idea we now needed a space to kind of like do this in, and took the idea to the guys from Santon City. And
before you get there, before you go there, Dean, I want to, because I want to, I think, preface that the collaboration with Santon City with your ability to sort of amplify some of these ideas and to bring it back to this growth hacker marketing that you're talking to, because because I feel like that's precisely what you were doing. How do you then connect the dots from the idea that you had developed to collaborating with Sentence City, which you can get into now, and 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 make the idea even bigger than the spark that you had started out with? Like, how do you connect these things in your mind? Like, how did they work? Because I get a sense that it wasn't a strategy that you set out with when you
No,
thought of inviting Ryan
no,
Holiday as the
no.
speaker. These things kept evolving and developing. Like, how do you get to these points where you amplify this idea and make it
Yes.
bigger?
Yeah, so I think there's you spot on. I mean, like, it takes a degree of fluidity of being flexible and trusting in the process, because you spot on that it didn't start off with this idea of like, why don't we go and break a Guinness World Record? I mean, like, it was not at all like it was not where the idea came from at all. Like, the idea was just to create an art installation of DJ Black Coffee using the coffee. But then what happened was, when I kind of like once you know that you're able to execute on this idea, now you want as many people as possible to see this happen, because that's really where the impact comes. And then, like, the first question is like, where's the venue, the best venue for this? Because you can't do it outside, because if a gust of wind comes, like, all of the coffee is gone, and the artist has to start from scratch. So it has to be like a building where you have a controlled environment and you protect it from the elements. And so Santon City was kind of the obvious choice, because I mean, like, the footfall in that mall is higher than probably, I mean, like, any other mall. I recently saw something that Fourways Mall actually overtook them, but it was a recent thing. At the time, Santon City was the mall with the highest footfall. And I had a relationship with the company who manages all of the exhibitions and the media side of the marketing on behalf of Santon City. So there was an existing relationship from years ago. So I approached this individual and said, "Listen, I have this idea, and we would love to do it at Santon City. The thing is, like, we don't have a massive marketing budget behind this, because the exhibition space in Santon City is not cheap. And so, because it's such a premium shopping space, I mean, like, and there's a lot of people wanting to get in, competing for the same space. So they kind of like, it's supply versus demand doesn't allow them to make it available cheap at a low rate. And so said that we really want to execute on this idea in Santon City. It's a premium mall, the country's #1 mall, like, highest footfall, like the right LSM in terms of the people that we try to reach with this event. Can we come and do it at the mall? But like, we're not in a position to actually pay for the space, because we're doing this on a shoestring budget. Can we find another way of making it worth your while? And so we basically brought Santon City on board as a value add partner, where we gave them exposure, brand exposure throughout our campaign. And so they agreed to come on board. And then they said, "Well, where in Santon City were you thinking of doing this?" And I said, "Well, obviously in the main area, the main exhibition space." And the response that came was that, "You do realize how big that space is?" And I went like, "Yes, I do." And they went like, "How big is this art installation going to be?" And I went like, "Oh, it's going to be about 1 meter by 1 meter." And the response I got was that, "We'll give you the space in Santon City, but it can't be in the main space, because the main space is so big that your 1 meter by 1 meter installation is just going to be completely lost in that space." And so I said, "Well, what is the requirement in terms of how big do you need it to be?" And I think the response that we got at the time was that it would have to be at least 3 meters by 3 meters or something like that. And so I went to Percy and I said, "Percy, can you do 3 meters by 3 meters? I know you've been practicing to do this 1 meter by 1 meter, but can you do 3 meters by 3 meters?" And Percy was like, "Yeah, I think I can do it." And we got Percy some more coffee. And he started practicing and he managed to pull it off. And in that process, like while we were doing this, I realized that as I was engaging with people, telling people about the idea and the excitement that the idea generated, I realized that we were busy working on something quite unique. And I thought that surely this must be like the biggest mosaic or art installation of this kind that's ever existed. But I didn't know that. So I kind of like, I asked my colleague Blair to reach out to the guys from Guinness World Records, and she reached out to them. And as it happened, they had a category for art installations made using food products, and and so we got the requirements from them, and then the requirements were like it needed to be bigger than. I think the current record was something like 4 meter by 4 meters or something like that. So we needed to beat that. And so we decided, listen, we're going to go with 5 by 5, and reached out to Percy. And Percy was like, you could see he kind of like he started becoming a little bit nervous because we were this thing had become going from 1 meter to 5 meters. 5 meters.
Yeah, every time you call him, you add
exactly, and like I have to deliver more coffee to his place. And so Percy kind of like and then there were a whole bunch of other requirements added on top of that in terms of like you're not allowed to use any negative spaces. You can't have any. So you can't have the white background, for example, stand out. So you had to fill the entire thing had to be covered in coffee, and then you weren't like so. And that was a big challenge. I mean, like, because you firstly, like, how do you do that? I mean, like, how do you kind of like, and you're only allowed to use coffee. You can't now go and bring like salt into the art installation. It has to be coffee. And so the only way we were able to do that was by using green unroasted coffee beans. But then the part of Guinness World Records, one of their requirements is that whatever you use to make this installation, you're not allowed to use anything that's still fit for human consumption. And so with the roasted coffee beans, that was like kind of not so difficult. We could like we managed to find that coffee, but like to find unroasted or green coffee beans that's no longer fit for human consumption is almost impossible because the shelf life on green coffee beans is so long that it'll just last forever, and then you roast it on demand. So nobody has like kind of like I started considering a career in stand-up comedy because everybody who I asked in the industry just started laughing at me. And eventually we found a lady who from Seven Oaks Trading who imports coffee from around the world, and she roasts on behalf of a lot of the coffee distributors in the country. And one of her shipments had become damaged, like got wet and started becoming moldy. And she very generously gave us all of the unroasted coffee that we needed. But after she gave it to me, she asked me what this was for, and I explained to her what we were doing. And she said to me, listen, good luck trying to find someone to grind this for you. And I kind of like having no experience in this space, I had no idea what she was talking about. So I asked her to elaborate. And she said to me, these green coffee beans are so hard that they'll destroy your grinder. And so I thought, well, surely I'll find someone who would do that. And I started phoning around, and again, nobody wanted to do it. They just like said, listen, it will destroy our grinders. It's just not going to work. So now we were stuck because we had to kind of follow through. We had made the commitment to the guys from the Guinness World Records. We had kind of committed publicly to the fact that we were going to we were going to achieve this Guinness World Record. And so we were kind of painted in a corner. There was no going back. So I went and bought a coffee grinder and put in these green coffee beans and started grinding. And like I would say 20 minutes in, the machine jammed up, and had to disassemble the machine. And like taking into account, I know nothing about coffee grinders or assembling or disassembling the stuff at all. Like I just like we were stuck. We'd committed to doing this. So, and I didn't have the luxury of time to be able to get a technician to come out. So I started disassembling the machine and reassembling it again, and then eventually figured out a way to grind the coffee without overheating the machine by putting fans on it from every direction, having fans blow onto the machine, and giving it regular breaks, and found just the right setting to be able to grind this coffee, and physically, like actually, like all of the coffee that we used in that installation, I had to grind it at my house in my kitchen. And so yeah, it was an adventure, but we figured it out, and I think that the big thing again, I mean, like, I think the idea, having an idea like this is one thing, but I mean, like, having people, like, the idea is useless without the people who are able to enable that idea. And Percy, I mean, like, if we didn't have Percy, then this idea would have just not gotten out of the starting blocks. And so Percy did an exceptional job.
Absolutely, yeah. And how did then achieving the Guinness World Record contribute to further amplification of the effort and the event and everything that you had organized prior to that?
Yeah, so I think the impact of that campaign of the Guinness World Record was just like, it exceeded all expectations. I mean, like, if you look at the amount of traffic that it got onto our event website, the amount of publicity that it generated, we effectively achieved, on, I would say, 10% of the budget of a big conference like the BCX Disrupt Summit or Discovery Leadership Summit. The impact that you generate from the budget, on the marketing budget on one of those big events, we effectively managed to generate a similar amount of activity on the website, and combined with the publicity, on about 10% of the budget from a big event to this one. So the impact was really massive. I mean, like, it's huge, and I think that the tricky thing around that is that it's not something that is very easy to replicate. So to kind of like to take that idea. So if somebody else came to me and say, listen, we've got an event, please do the same thing. Here's 10% of the budget that we would ordinarily spend, like, go and do the same thing. I probably wouldn't be able to do that. But it was a combination of things. I mean, like, and I think a big part of what enabled that success was the fact that it was DJ Black Coffee that we did the installation of. Like, he wasn't able to be there on the day when we broke that world record, but wherever he was in the world, like, he was obviously quite excited about this, because that installation that Percy created was so beautiful and kind of like, so it had so much impact that I think it would have been very difficult for DJ Black Coffee not to get excited about that. So he started getting involved and tweeting about it and posting on Instagram about it. And I mean, like, the amount of publicity that we got was incredible. Like, we were handing out complimentary cups of black coffee at the Guinness World Record attempt, and on the cups we would give information about the event, and so again, in tying all of these elements together, it just came together so beautifully in a way that, I mean, like, exceeded all expectations. I mean, like, literally, like, yeah, it was phenomenal.
You've always played on what feels like a global stage, even though you were based in South Africa at the time.
Yes.
Of course, you're now based in California.
Yes.
How has your strategy changed between when you were based here and now being based overseas, in terms of the kinds or types of experiences that you're now able to build, or at least are working on?
Yes. So yeah, it's think yeah, it's been like moving to California has been a thrilling but humbling experience. Like I think that that the everything in the US seems to be like amplified, seems to be so much bigger, and so I think that that in itself has been quite challenging. Like I think I remember one of my school friends whose mom moved to San Francisco many years ago, um, said that when you're in South Africa, you kind of like you're operating in in a level that's like you're one of the top 1%. I mean, like, and then when you come to America, you're part of the bottom 99%, and that's kind of like that. To a large extent, it felt like that because in South Africa, you kind of like you spend so many years building up a network, you spend so many years building up credibility, and people know and respect you for what you've done and what you've accomplished. And then you move into a completely different market, and the stuff that you've done and achieved, like people don't know about it. Like when you go to the like most businessmen in South Africa, and you mention a name like the Discovery Leadership Summit, most people will know what you're talking about. Now you go into a different market in a place like California, nobody's ever heard of the Discovery Leadership Summit, and nobody cares about it. Like you kind of like, so that has been quite challenging. But at the same time, I think it's so was it challenging when I first started building the Discovery Leadership Summit, because it was the first time that I'd ever done anything like that. I think the big difference now is that the thing that I didn't have when I first set out was I didn't have a track record of building business conferences at all. Like I mean, like it was my first one, and I didn't have a network to tap into. I had to kind of like go from scratch. So now I've managed to build up an incredible network, and the credibility, in spite of the fact that people don't understand, like don't have a frame of reference for the Discovery Leadership Summit. Like everybody knows who Sir Richard is, and everybody knows who Will.i.am is, or who Malcolm Gladwell is. So that's really helped me to a large extent to kind of like position myself in a way where people do kind of like take notice of what it is that you're pursuing. I think the big thing for me has been the big change for me has been in the past. A lot of it has been um, kind of like almost me seeing myself as a self-appointed Prometheus. I mean, like in terms of wanting to make fire, except the fire from the gods, accessible to the to ordinary people. That was always kind of like the way I approached it, and the reason I kind of started building these events, and to a large extent, I mean, like it's still that, but I think that I've also come to realize that there are bigger causes behind that can be built into these projects, and to give a more impact and leave a more lasting impression on the people whose lives this will touch, not only from the attendees' point of view, but the kind of like the bigger ripple effect that this created. So I think basically identifying a bigger reason behind why we're doing this, and the project, the big project I've been focusing on at the moment, is effectively a project aimed at assisting the United Nations in addressing their global development goals through the use of technology. And so it's a massive cause that we kind of like that we're driving. But I mean, like that there's no doubt that it brings a level of buoyancy to it as well, because people want to be involved in something that has significance behind it and that has a bigger meaning behind it. And so that's really, I think that's really like the one big shift that I can think of that is very different from the way I pursued things, or approached these type of projects in historically.
Right. In closing, Dean, what's the secret, in your opinion, to being able to connect dots that are seemingly unconnected or that seemingly don't work together? Is it because you are constantly on the lookout for certain things? And as such, because you're focusing there, you're able to see the puzzle pieces. Like, what's the secret, or what's your secret to it?
Yeah, um, I think that I would say that it would probably be curiosity. It would probably be, if I had to sum it up in a single word, it would be curiosity. In that I've always been like, naturally I've been a very curious person, in that I when if I see something done that I'm interested in, like I want to understand like everything that I can possibly understand about that. And 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 I guess like there's probably like a tiny degree of obsessive compulsive disorder mixed into that, in terms of when I kind of like when I zone on into, when I decide to focus on whatever it is that the challenge is that I'm focusing on, or the project is that I'm focusing on, it becomes all consuming. Like that becomes the thing that it's all about. So I lose myself and I want to learn everything I can, and about that thing. So I kind of like I really dig into the details around it. And so like when I'm working on a particular speaker, I learn everything that's available on that speaker. I'll go and watch and read all of their books, and really understand what they're about. So I get to capture their essence in a more profound way, or position them in a more profound way. And then added to that is just many years of kind of like having lived this way. I've been exposed to a lot of different ideas and a lot of different people, and I think that I was actually thinking about that this morning. In that I'm an avid reader. Like I love reading, and I spend a lot of time reading and watching TED talks and attending conferences and all of that. But I think that probably the most profound way that I've been able to tap into unique knowledge has been through conversations, like through meeting and interacting with interesting people. And I think that's been one of the big things that has really helped me, is being able to tap into an incredible network, like through meeting with people for coffee, like the way the two of us used to go for coffee all the time. Like every time you kind of like you walk away from an interaction with like a meeting somebody interesting for a cup of coffee, you walk away from that conversation enriched, and you kind of like you feel like you've learned something, and you've kind of like you've grown in some way. And by doing that, it's kind of like the connecting of those dots almost start happening organically, because you kind of like
Yeah.
you'll just remember that something that this guy said, or something that I saw here, kind of like seems to relate to this in some way. Um, and then next thing you know, it like you're busy kind of achieving a Guinness World Record, because you brought two completely unrelated things together. So I think it's just it's very much an organic approach, but one that you need to keep fueling by reading as many books as you can, listening to as many podcasts as you can, meeting with as many people as you can, and kind of like, and I think that, and sometimes those interactions are like the most random interactions, but quite often it's like from a discussion that you have with the Uber driver. So it's like, I think that there's wisdom all around us. I mean, like, and it's just basically, it's just like you just have to drill by kind of, and the way to drill for that wisdom is just by kind of asking people questions, and like learning about them, being genuinely curious about people without any agenda, like just wanting to learn about people, because they like, everybody has like an interesting story and something that they can teach you, and in trying to tap into that and learn from these people without an agenda, that's really where the magic happens, where you get to kind of bring all of these streams of information together, and combine it into something profound.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point to close on. And yeah, from that I think I take this idea of of genuine curiosity and following through with that curiosity and being immersed in whatever you want to build, to then get down to the detail of it and build those experiences.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Dean. That was very inspiring.
Thank you so much, Bongezi. I really appreciate the opportunity, man. It was good to see you again.